joining us on the Boardwalk kind of hotline to get more into the NBA play-in, the NBA playoffs, and more. It is the one and only NBA insider extraordinaire, Brandon Scoop B. Robinson joins us live here in virtual living color on the Boardwalk kind of hotline, sporting a very fresh Sixers jacket. My friend, how you doing today?
I'm wonderful, man. How you feeling?
I'm doing pretty good. You know, we got NBA games on pretty much every night at this point. It's a good time for all. And before we get to the Sixers and the other stuff, I gotta touch on with this. I talked about this a little bit earlier. So the numbers came out for the Warriors-Lakers game last night. Mm-hmm. And if there's ever been a conversation about the importance of star power in the NBA, it's these numbers. Last night's game was the most watched NBA game on ESPN since 2019. The viewership was up 190% over any of the playing games last year. We saw last year that any Western Conference game that LeBron was in, they had a 2 to 3 million more viewership from the games without him than with him. I don't think we can undersell the fact that this is a league driven by stars, and LeBron is still the star of the stars in this league, at least in terms of viewership and people's interest.
They usually say that sex sells. In this case, in sports, LeBron sells. And I think in this instance, particularly the nostalgia is almost about that point where we start really analyzing the Steph Curry, LeBron James years in the NBA. It's interesting when you look at how folks looked at the Celtics and the Lakers rivalry concurrently. And at least in my era, I know I'm a little bit older than you, but you start to look at the Chicago Bulls as an iconic franchise. Once you gloss over that, I think years from now, we'll look at the Steph Curry and the LeBron James feud eras in the same vein. And so I think last night gave you that. Many people were critical of the play-in tournament and for the right reasons. But it's showing that the fact that people continue to talk about it, that shows that people are interested as well. So kudos in that regard. But Josh, I just want to add, it wasn't a fluke. I mean, that game was crazy.
It was two different games, actually, in one game, because you had the Lakers decide to play defense in the second half, and in the first half, it felt like between Steph and Wiggins, nobody was stopping them at all in the first half. It was a strange game.
And I'll add that if Kelly Oubre was playing, it might be a different conversation.
That's very true. Maybe Kelly Oubre is running out to LeBron for that three instead of Steph at the end of the game.
Yeah, but the other thing is this: when LeBron is on. They played. I was going to say PPP, but PPR, poor performance. I guess that is PPP. But what I'll say is Alex Caruso was the unsung hero in that game yesterday as well. Key steal in the game, and I also think that more than anything else, it just was good basketball, fun basketball being played. But you live by the three, you die by the three. In this case, the 3-point shooter that was in the winning column wasn't LeBron James and the Los Angeles Lakers, who will play the Phoenix Suns in round one of the NBA playoffs. But I'll tell you, man, the Lakers are one of the most threatening seventh seeds there is currently, and I think that as long as they stay healthy, the Lakers will be in a good position. But the Western Conference has also gotten better too.
It definitely has, but you gotta wonder if you're the Suns, you were probably almost rooting for the Warriors last night, right? I mean, you don't want to see LeBron and AD coming in there against your team in the first round. I mean, that's a second round or a finals matchup, not a first round matchup. If you're the Suns, you're probably like, oh man, we gotta deal with LeBron and AD in the first round. Come on.
Yeah, they definitely were cheering for that. And the Warriors will play they'll play the Memphis Grizzlies tomorrow. But, I definitely think that the Suns and the Lakers pose a legitimate threat for the Suns, because the Suns, I think, played well in the regular season. And, they arguably have the executive of the year in James Jones. I know that the Brooklyn Nets faithful will have something to say about that as it relates to Sean Marks and the magicry or the wizardry that took place in Brooklyn. But, arguably Monty Williams could be the coach of the year as well. And, people have talked about Chris Paul and his impact and, the MVP candidacy there. But don't be fooled, though. The Los Angeles Lakers are still the NBA's reigning champions and the NBA's Western Conference champions. And their season this year was quite tumultuous. It seems that they're starting to get their act together. And, yesterday was a great start.
And, of course, the Lakers will play the Suns. It's a 3:30 game this Sunday, right after the Sixers play at the beginning of that slate. And that comes into the game tonight. Brandon Scoop B. Robinson, NBA insider, joining us here on the Boardwalk Kind of Hotline here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. Pacers, Wizards, two teams that got here completely different ways. The Pacers basically punched the Hornets, and the Hornets didn't get back up off the canvas. Meanwhile, the Wizards played good for about a quarter and a half, and then Jason Tatum just told them to go home, and the Wizards obliged.
The Pacers didn't punch the Hornets. They used Raid.
Must have been some strong raid there because, man, they just wilted and went away. I mean, it was like I thought it would be a competitive game, honestly. I'm like, oh, Pacers, Hornets, all right, this will be interesting. And it was just like, Mike Tyson used to say, everyone has a game plan like a punch in the face, right? Well, the Hornets got punched in the face a couple times and they gave up.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think when it's all said and done, I'd like to see a round one matchup between the Philadelphia 76ers and the Washington Wizards. I think it'd be great to have Russell Westbrook in the fold. It'll be great to see what a full-strength Wizards team can do against a highly potent 76ers team, particularly because the Wizards have been playing beneath their privilege all year. Russell Westbrook started out, with a quad injury and didn't complain about it. He got the triple-double record, beating Oscar Robertson with 182 overall throughout his career. Took him about 3 or 4 teams. But Bradley Beal hasn't been playing at full strength. The last game, you kind of saw it. But I think that in this game, going against the Pacers is in at least Russell Westbrook's favor. I'll tell you that in writing at Bally Sports Network, I wrote a piece last week where I talked about Russell Westbrook having career-wise the most triple-doubles that he's had in his career is against the Indiana Pacers. He's had 10. And Sabonis is the star of that team and the all-star of the team at very least. Karis LeVert is still in concussion protocol, COVID protocol. Those P's and those C's I got to get together. Concussion protocol for the Indiana Pacers. But I think this is a game that is winnable. But all hands have to be on deck in this matchup. But ultimately we'll see who the Sixers will play in round one. It'll be interesting.
Indiana is one of the strangest teams this year too, because they fired Nate McMillan after last year. They bring in this new coach that nobody can say his name anyway. All right, his staff is having fights with players. Greg Foster. The team reports were that they weren't happy with the new coaches. You saw the midseason slump they had. Took Karis LeVert half the year to get through his medical issues, which thankfully he got that taken care of. But still, it's like the Pacers are lucky to even be here at this point. They got to be one of the strangest stories of the NBA season.
The Pacers have an interesting conundrum. I was kind of privy to some of the conversations as it related to the interview process last offseason. You had a myriad of candidates that were interested in actually the owner, who was one of the oldest owners in North American sports, as well as their general manager and Kevin Pritchard. They were very, very hands-on in the interview process. And just from what I understand, for whatever reason, a lot of people decided that they didn't want to coach those who were, in the coaching discussion, dialogue, conversation, what have you. And then you come into this season and then you see kind of some of the remnants of just confusion within the front office that I hope they get straightened out. But I am disappointed that Nate McMillan was let go. A lot of that within that front office, like I mentioned, and Victor Oladipo wanted out, as I've been telling you guys since last season.
Yep.
There were a myriad of teams, including the Heat, the Knicks, and others who were interested in Oladipo. He's going, and he may sit out the rest of this season, or rather the playoffs. And you look at Nate McMillan and his success as in the Atlanta Hawks interim head coach. Their biggest win really has been their defense. When you look at the Hawks and you look at the play of Clint Capella, who, led the league in rebounds this season, and, maybe a smidge or a hair below in the rankings as it relates to blocks below Rudy Gobert. So I think that Nate McMillan is in an excellent position. And I think that it's just interesting to see where coaches have gone in the last couple of years. I could write a book about that.
Absolutely. Well, maybe you should write a book. Everybody else is writing a book these days.
Yeah, right.
Brandon Scoop B. Robinson joining us here on Game Night at Scoop B on Twitter here on 97.3 ESPN. The Wizards are a team, obviously. They got 2-star players. So if you're the Sixers, I'm going to put your Sixers hat on. You're wearing the nice Sixers jacket for us here as you watch on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter the show. I'll ask you, would you rather, if you're the Sixers, play the Pacers or the Wizards?
I think it would be entertaining to see the Sixers and the Wizards play. I think, but I think if Karis LeVert is at full strength coming back from protocol, I think he's been an excellent story in basketball this season. So, yeah, in answer to your question, yes, personally, I'd like to see a Wizards Sixers matchup. But from a stylistic basketball perspective, I like Indiana's roster. They're just young.
Now, let's say a couple other teams in the Eastern Conference here. Obviously, the one matchup I think everyone's talking about right now is the Bucks and the Heat. That's a matchup of two teams that they played last year. And we know the Heat, they made that, whether you would call it a Cinderella run or not, to the NBA Finals. Either way, they're a really good basketball team with some really good players and a great coach. And Budenholzer has a long history of not having success in the postseason. 3 number 1 seeds, never got to the NBA Finals. 2-time league MVP, Giannis Antetokounmpo. He hasn't gotten to the NBA Finals. They got Drew Holiday. Is this the year the Bucks get by the Heat, or do you think the Heat are going to take them out?
I think the Bucks have definitely gotten better. But I think when you look at what they've added in the offseason, I think Drew Holiday is the difference maker for Milwaukee. But I don't sleep on the Heat. They're still the NBA's reigning Eastern Conference champions. And, I think the Heat, like the Boston Celtics, legitimately got a raw deal because of COVID protocol, particularly in the months of January, where you look at Jimmy Butler and him sitting out. And even, he's no longer on the roster, but when you look at Avery Bradley and him sitting out, and, and then the Heat kind of got better. They added Trevor Ariza to their roster. They added Dwayne Dedmon to their roster. And then you look at Milwaukee. I mean, they didn't get Bogdan for a myriad of different reasons from behind the scenes. But, what I'll tell you is when you look at Milwaukee, I think the fact that they added PJ Tucker, the fact that they added Bobby Portis, Milwaukee to me mirrors the Dallas Mavericks so much because Luka, like Giannis, needed some goons, and both teams, the Mavericks and the Bucks respectively, went and got that for that team. And so the addition of, to play against the Heat, you got to play that smash mouth basketball, and you have to combat Jimmy Butler's mid-range, which I think is so supremely underrated.
The other Eastern Conference game on Saturday is not a highly anticipated matchup. It's a highly anticipated viewing experience because, at least according to everything we know, the big three will be on the court. Durant, Harden, Kyrie. We finally get to see this much hoped-for trio on the court in a playoff game for a playoff series, and it starts this Saturday.
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting. I for as much fanfare as the Nets have gotten this season, the Philadelphia 76ers are still a first seed, and I think that the Nets actually are spared by not being a 1 seed and having the potential of playing against a Washington Wizards team that they struggled with throughout the course of this season. And I think that when you look at the Nets at large playing against a Boston Celtics team, Jaylen Brown kind of helps them being out for Boston. It helps Brooklyn. But I also think that you can't sleep on Jason Tatum. Jason Tatum is getting his groove. They made a movie called Stella Got Her Groove Back. Jason Tatum got his groove back. And, you saw it in the game the other night against the Wizards, man. I think Jason Tatum, He showed you that he had heart in his rookie season, going toe-to-toe with the Cleveland Cavaliers when his Celtics were in the NBA's Eastern Conference Final. He was never scared, and I think he has to take a similar approach. He's grown a lot since then, but I think he'll take that similar approach under head coach Brad Stevens. And I think that when you look at the Brooklyn Nets, I think one of the things that many people have been critical about is their level of defense or lack thereof in many people's minds. But Nick Claxton checks the box, and I believe locally in the New York metropolitan area, people have had a first row seat to see what Nick Claxton is doing. But I really do think that this is the series for DeAndre Jordan to kind of step up, because it's been quiet. But they've added some pieces. They added Alize Johnson, and they added Mike James as well. They've got some adequate pieces within Brooklyn. But the focus is on Harden, the focus is on Durant, and the focus is on Kyrie Irving as well.
You mentioned those Sixers. They are the number one seed in the Eastern Conference. In the regular season, the last 3 years, they have an 80.9 winning percentage at home, 63.6 winning percentage at home in the postseason. We know that the number 1 and 2 seeds, they average about 72% winning percentage at home in the postseason the last few years, at least before the bubble, because we don't count the bubble games for the home court advantage numbers. But still, how significant is that home court advantage for the Sixers in your mind, considering that this is the place that they have done their most winning?
More fans in the stands gives you a level of momentum. But I think that playing most of the season without fans, it's almost like the playoffs are making players reprogram their mind that they matter. And so I think that home court advantage definitely gives you a level of comfort, and I really a matter of perspective. So sitting in on the Sixers Zoom calls last year, I remember Brett Brown, former Sixers coach, discussing just routine and discussing how COVID changed things, because he remembered what time he would leave his house, what time he would step foot at a Dunkin' Donuts and grab his coffee, what time he had coaching planning meetings. And, he remembered a fan in the stands because this person said that to them, remembering what Lucky running shoes he put on, just all of that level of routine. I think the playoffs is recalibrating many players, coaches, and what have you, their whole process of routine. And I think that when you look at home court advantage for the 76ers, it matters because you're able to fill up the stands. I don't know exactly what the fan count is for the Wells Fargo Center, but I know locally in the New York metropolitan area, if I'm not mistaken, Madison Square Garden and Barclays Center will be at almost 8,000 to 9,000. And so I think that when you have people cheering your name, when you have people, I can only imagine in Philadelphia when you did the starting lineup and you introduced the visiting team and you didn't hear sucks. It kind of sucked. You didn't hear that. So, I definitely think that the Philadelphia faithful, whether in the stadium, whether on Twitter, will be appreciated by, the personnel on the Sixers squad. And what a time to be alive.
Yeah, it'll be over 10,000 are allowed in the building for the first 2 rounds. Now, there's hope, fingers crossed, everything goes well. They could have a full building either in the Eastern Conference Finals or if they get to the NBA Finals. So that's a little side note to keep in mind as well. So then at the end of the day, where do the Sixers fall in your hierarchy of who can win the Eastern Conference? They have the home court advantage, but they don't have the trio like the Nets do. They don't have the 2-time league MVP like Giannis, and they're not the defending conference champions like the Heat.
It's interesting you bring that up. So please be looking out for an article and an interview with Terrell Harris Sr., agent of Tobias Harris, that will drop at valleysports.com on Saturday. We actually discussed that notion about Tobias Harris. I am one who actually does believe that the Sixers do have the big three in Ben Simmons, Joel Embiid, and Tobias Harris. Tobias is just not spoken about in the same vein.
Right.
I think that the Sixers, more than anything else, have added from positions 1 to 15 a potent roster. I think, even down to the Danny Greens of the world, who has multiple championship experiences, whether albeit playing for the San Antonio Spurs, playing for the Los Angeles Lakers or the Toronto Raptors. And then I'll add this. Dwight Howard, I think, was, as well as Seth Curry, were two of the biggest deals in the NBA market this past offseason. I'll tell you that, Dwight Howard, one of his biggest gripes and concerns with Los Angeles Lakers going into the offseason was the combination of money as well as where he would be playing at the end of games. Imagine a world, I've been using that so much in my writing and Twitter these days, but imagine a world where when the Lakers were without Anthony Davis and LeBron James, they still had Dwight Howard. I think that Dwight Howard's presence was everything that many thought Al Horford would have been last season for the 76ers. And he is a defensive presence that will be very much utilized in the postseason. So I like the Sixers a lot. I like them from positions 1 to 15. You talk to somebody in Brooklyn, I've spoken to folks within that organization, and they feel as though Philadelphia keeps them honest. And that Miami is a scrappy team. And so when you compare, just Philadelphia and Brooklyn as the two top tier teams, I like the Sixers on paper better, but I do like the Nets. But I also think that the Milwaukee Bucks are very much slept on, as well as the Miami Heat. I think that the Bucks and the Heat are both underdogs. But coming out of the Eastern Conference, I am torn between the Sixers and the Nets because it's so wide open on both sides. It's unpredictable. And it's going to be a very interesting 2 months, and I'm excited.
Well, of course, you can catch all the action. We can hear all right here on 97.3 ESPN for tonight. Pacers, Wizards right here at 7:30 on 97.3 ESPN. Sixers at 1 o'clock on Sunday. We got the NBA playoffs all the way through right here on 97.3. And to follow all the inside information, the NBA Insider Extraordinaire, Brandon Scoop B Robinson, at Scoop B on Twitter and Instagram. Don't forget about the Instagram as well. His all guests appear on the Boardwalk Hotline. As you heard him mention there, Bally Sports. You want to see him on those little regional networks, the Fox regional networks. They're all Bally Sports now. People are watching SportsCenter now. They're like, what is Bally Sports? Well, that's why all the Fox regional networks, they got bought out. They got taken over, and Brandon Scoop B Robinson has taken over the NBA Insider. So congratulations on that opportunity. You more than earned it, my friend. So I'm glad to see you moving onward and upward.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I've been keeping quiet for about a month and a half. Glad to break the news to you guys, and I'm glad to be at Bally. It's a great fit.
It's a nice looking set too. I got to say that as well.
Thank you, man. I double writing and also in and out of the studio doing interviews with stuff. So please be looking out for a lot of cool stuff coming pretty soon. I'm excited for you all to see what we've been working on behind the scenes.
Love it. At Scoop B on Twitter and Instagram to catch that all. And as all guests, they appear on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. My friend, take care of yourself. Keep up the great work.
My God, thank you so much. I'll talk to you soon. You do keep doing great work as well.
I'm doing my best. Somebody's got to do a job.
Word.
At Scoop B on Twitter and Instagram for the full Scoop B experience.